So today I wanted to talk about one of my favorite companies, Games Workshop, and why I love them so much. But in all honesty, this is a hobby I've been in probably for the longest out of any hobbies I've participated in. This hobby is a hobby I've been doing since 6th grade, middle school, when I actually lived in a different country. So I've actually, this hobby has transcended continents, okay, for me at least. I've always enjoyed it. I've loved the lore. I've loved the worlds that were built. I love the memories that I've made. But I can't get over the fact that Games Workshop, similar to Wizards of the Coast, does not actually serve the hobbyist at all. And to be honest, this isn't surprising as people keep spending more and more on the hobby. But I actually have some data today to show that in the last year, that's not really true. And Warhammer 11th edition is coming out here soon, and I'm sure nobody's really stoked about it. As somebody who's played the hobby, I've only played Horus Heresy, never really gotten into 40k, and that's just because of how frequent the editions come out and we'll get into this later, how they make certain models obsolete. But that's besides the point. And we'll talk about pricing and why I suggest, I am going to make this comment, and I've held this belief probably for the last 3 years. I suggest you just buy your own 3D printer and 3D print your own minis. Just make proxies. Just make proxies. And again, I am not saying to 3D print GW models. I am saying to 3D print unique artistic models. Okay? For legal reasons, I am saying that. Okay? But that's besides the point. I do not like Games Workshop in the way that they exist currently, and I think they are they're money suckers, similar to Wizards of the Coast currently. And while Wizards of the Coast, I would say, have been money suckers for the past 3-4 years, Games Workshop has been doing it for longer. They've, Wizards of the Coast and Hasbro are kind of like the LeBron James, right? But the Michael Jordan of the space is Games Workshop when it comes to that, when it comes to killing hobbies. Because I don't know a lot of people who don't just print their 3D minis anymore, 3D print their own minis. And again, if you're ever at one of my tables, I will be completely fine playing against your homemade models. And there's actually a whole game centered around that. It's called One Page Rules. Go look at it, go support it. From what I remember, it was a Patreon set back in 2023 to help support these Warhammer hobbyists that kind of fell out of love with the company. And I completely agree with their frustrations with Games Workshop. But that's besides the point. Games Workshop pricing strategy has basically made the hobby unaffordable, with annual price increases pounding over time, frequent edition changes like the shift from Warhammer 40k 10th edition in 2023, which exacerbate this, rendering older models less viable through the legend system, a repository for basically discontinued units that are playable in casual games but often banned in tournaments, effectively acting as sort of this soft ban list. This pushes players to repurchase updated models or armies to stay competitive. And I just think it's really scummy from GW. Provide you all some data for price increases over time, so you guys know I'm not just talking out my ass. From 2019 to 2025, GW implemented at least 6 annual price hikes, averaging 3 to 5% a year, with some products rising more. For example, a standard Space Marine tactical squad increased from $40 in 2019 to $60 by 2025. That is a 50% rise, outpacing inflation. At least here in the US, CPI only rose around 25% in the same period. And again, this is some of the worst inflation in US history over a period of time, and Space Marine prices have increased double that, especially in today's market where the US dollar is going less and less than what it was going for last year. The price of goods only seem to be going up, and salaries are not increasing at the same rate. I don't think you have to be a rocket scientist to understand that. Sorry. I think that's really coming from a company. In 2024 alone, over 200 products saw increases of 3 to 10%. They blame this on inflation and supply chain costs, which some of that could actually be true. But I mean, it's hard to trust a company. Are they really suffering from these inflation and supply costs, or do they really just want to use it as an excuse to increase profits once more? I think it's the latter. The impact of edition updates, the 10th edition, which launched in June of 2023, simplified rules but obsoleted many older models by moving them to legends. As of 2025, over 300 units across factions, including fine cast characters like older captains, have been shifted with no further balance updates or tournament support. This affects 20 to 30%, around about that, of pre-10th collections for some players, forcing rebuying, basically replacing their old Terminators with new Terminators. That's a $60 increase for roughly not much more fun. Again, I'm going to point you in the direction of one-page rules. Legend rules updated sporadically. Last major drop, July 2023, with 400 plus pages. They're basically seen as a graveyard for models, reducing their value on the resale markets by 20 to 50%, because again, they're not tournament legal and they're not getting updates in the rule sets. It's hard. It sucks to see good money going to waste, and that's what they're doing, just so they can increase profits. That's the only reason why they're doing that. There is no other reason. And if somebody tells you there's another reason, they're lying to you. They're lying to you. Okay, let's look at the player impact metrics. Surveys from hobby sites like Warhammer, what a name, by the way, show 60% of competitive players spend $200 to $500 extra post 10th edition up to update armies, with 40% citing obsolescence as a quitting factor in the hobby. 40% of hobbyists who quit from 9th edition to 10th edition, not even counting players who quit from previous editions, they are citing nearly half the players who quit from obsolescence as the key factor. And to me, that sucks. That sucks. We should all be able to enjoy the hobby that we like. But I mean, we've put up with GW shit for far too long, i.e. the last 6 years of price hikes, and this is what we're getting. So again, I made a video about a year ago on the same topic, and I've been saying the same message this whole time. Also, recently, GW has wanted to turn Warhammer into an esport or adopt a Magic the Gathering style model, prioritizing profits again over accessibility. And I'm comparing the two companies, or analyzing both companies, because they operate in basically the same way. GW has pushed competitive play through organized tournaments and esport-like events, while shifting toward smaller modular armies formats reminiscent of Magic the Gathering card packs and rotations. This encourages buying multiple small forces via combat patrol boxes instead of expanding large armies, which was what the hobby was built on, was having one large army that you fought against your friend with. But I mean, that doesn't make enough money. So boosting short-term sales, but alienating hobbyists who, of course, prefer the deep narrative-driven collections. And I mean, this is just clear profit-driven by GW's record earnings, and nobody's voting with their dollar. I can't believe it. So it's only going to get worse, folks. That is what I'm going to say. To back some data by why they're profit prioritizing, here are the metrics. GW's 2025 financials show 70% gross margins on miniatures, 70%, with warnings of tariffs potentially adding 10 to 20% cost passed to the consumer. Despite profits, players' surveys indicate 50% feel the hobby is less accessible due to constant Frankensteining of issues and rules, which I agree with. You are only going to make the hobby more inaccessible, which again, I think is bad for the overall hobby's health. I think if you have fans and you build this fan base that like the hobby, that love the company, that are attracted to the hobby, you will make more money in the long run. But I mean, clearly they're short-sighted and clearly short-minded. And again, if you don't understand why 70% gross margin cost is bad and why potentially there will be an additional 10 to 20% price hike due to tariffs is bad, I don't know what to say. And again, when those tariffs hit, especially for Americans, I'm going to suggest, again, pulling out the 3D printer and playing one-page rules. And I'm not a fan of price hiking, and especially when they're making 70% already gross margins on miniatures, they can easily forgo the price increase in tariffs and still make 50 to 60%. It's insane. So their buffer is so insane that they shouldn't even need to account for tariffs. That's how insane it's gotten. Okay, folks, that number should be going, and this is being nice because most companies operate in 5 to 10% gross margins. They're operating at 70%. If they bump that number down to 30%, I mean, we're in a whole different price level. So, which is way more accessible to the average kid, which is what the hobby was originally made for, was for kids. You have to understand that. Anyway, besides the point. And it's only gotten worse. There's going to be potential moves to purge more content, like Age of Sigmar, to bolster the old world returning. That's what they're doing. They're removing AOS, removing support from AOS to re-support the old world. Which again, the old world should have never left, okay? And the old world End Times was written well until the very end, which some of the worst writing I've ever read. And it was clearly just to make more money with the release of AOS. That was the only reason why they wrote the End Times like that at the very end there. Even though the End Times was one of the best written pieces of literature, I would say, within the modern era or within the 21st century. But then they decided to flush it all down the drain with the very last act of the End Times, I would say. And we all know what happened, and I think it was stupid. How it ended. I do think good should have prevailed, and I think it's dumb how they ended it. But that's besides the point. They're basically, for AOS 4th edition, which came out in 2024, GW removed over 200 units models, including entire lines of Sacrosanct Chamber Stormcast models, Bone Splitters, and Beast of Chaos, and multiple Warcry warbands. This affects 15% to 20% of AOS armies, with resin models, i.e. older models, phased out entirely. In my opinion, this has happened before. And I will side with the AOS guys on this. I think this is stupid. But again, they were pro AOS when it came out. So, I mean, what comes around goes around. It's how the saying goes. And as Tron, I do fight for the users, some might say. So I feel obligated to fight for y'all. But, I mean, this has happened before, and now it's happening to you, and now you're complaining. So, I mean, now you know how it feels. But what I will say is I do side with y'all on this, and I think it's they're doing this shit again. So since they introduced AOS, this has been a problem within the industry, within the hobby as a whole. Okay, the phasing out problem to sell more newer models has been a problem since they introduced AOS and killed the original Warhammer Fantasy tabletop models and setting for AOS. It was clearly just profit driven. I mean, the lore was written so badly at the end, I don't even know what to say. But as always, folks, it's been your host, Matthew, and I hope you'll have a great rest of your day. Just wanted to draw some alarming things to this hobby I once loved. I may make a sarcastic bit video about it, but I'm here to say the words. So that's what I will do. I'll keep telling the truth no matter what. And I hope you all have a great rest of your day, or a great day, whatever it may be. Remember, as always, folks, junk it out.